Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today we are on Zoom as we're talking to EchoIQ Limited. ASX code is EIQ. We have Dustin Haines, the CEO of the company, talking to us from the States, and that's why we are not at our UWA club, our usual self. We're on Zoom today. EchoIQ is a tech company that has a solution to help cardiologists look at cardiograms to try and bring a solution to a big problem for cardiovascular diseases. There is a 50% misdiagnosis or non-diagnosis in practice at the moment, and EchoIQ is bringing a solution to a well-known misdemeanor in the industry. So hopefully today we will get Dustin to unpack all the clinical and technical factors that drives the business of EchoIQ Limited. Before we move on, I would just like to take some time here to just get all those that are watching to help us develop our YouTube channel. For those who are not subscribed to us already at this point in time, please do. And also click on that like button. All these little things help us with the algorithms in YouTube. And let's move on into the Coffee with Samso. As usual, grab your favorite beverage, sit back and enjoy the Coffee with Samso. Thank you. Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today we are talking with EchoIQ Limited. ASX code is EIQ. As you can see, we're talking on Zoom today. I'm talking to the CEO of EchoIQ, Dustin Haines, who's based in the States. So, Dustin, welcome to Coffee with Samso. Look, I'll get you to just kick off things, give us an intro on yourself, give us a rundown on how you got involved with the company and your biography, I guess, in some ways.
Sure. No, appreciate it. And thank you very much for the invite and for hosting me. And really excited to share the story. Yeah, look, I mean, I started at EchoIQ. I'm relatively new. I started in January of this year. And it was really a culmination of actually a couple of years of talking with the board. In fact, the chairman of the board, Andrew Grover, who was the interim CEO prior to me coming in and was one of the initial founders of the company, had the foresight to realize that with a company like EchoIQ having an FDA-cleared product was going to be almost paramount that we had a CEO located in the United States, given that it's one of the largest markets in the world. The technology was going to be first introduced in the United States. And as we were looking to really grow the business, it just made sense. So kudos to him for having that foresight. So he and I talked actually about a year and a half or so ago. And it was interesting. If you look at my past history, and I'm sure people will look on LinkedIn or even with the slides that we have, you can see a bit about where I come from. But I spent about 25 years or so really in the pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device space. So I understood the space really well. In my last role, I was actually in Hong Kong. I was covering all of the Middle East, Turkey, Russia, all the way through Southeast and all of Asia. And I was really kind of watching as I was talking to governments around the world and just understanding what was happening. And you could see a seismic shift changing. Technology obviously was making a big impact on the healthcare systems, but the governments were struggling with how do we bring technology in that creates efficiency and better outcomes for our patients. And so as I was watching this happen, I was looking at my career saying, where does it make sense? Where is there the biggest unmet need? And I bumped into EchoIQ. Bumped into them online, started to watch what they were doing, and started to realize, we've got an existential crisis happening around the world. If you look at cardiovascular disease today, it's still the leading cause of death. And it doesn't matter whether you're in one of the most healthy countries in the world like Japan or one of the most unhealthy countries like United States. Cardiovascular disease still affects many, many millions of people, and it's simply because either we're aging and the population continues to see that growth, which is fantastic, or simply we just have malnutrition, we have poor nutrition, or we simply just have comorbidities that cause cardiovascular disease. So as I looked at what EchoIQ was doing, I reached out to Andrew Grover and the team and said, listen, I don't have AI technology experience, but I understand this space really well. I'd love to get involved. So we had conversations, and I was fortunate enough when we got the FDA clearance in October for Andrew to call me and say, listen, we are imminently going to be launching this product. We need a CEO in the United States. Would you be interested? And it took me 10 seconds to say yes. It was absolutely for sure made sense to me. So that's how I got here. I understood the space from looking at it from the pharmaceutical lens, from the medical device lens. And EchoIQ brought something the market was just tremendously different than what I've seen anyplace else. And what we really do will be saving millions and millions of lives by simply helping cardiologists diagnose structural heart disease a little bit better and faster than they currently do today.
You know, obviously in the research, while I'm researching the business and everything else, I was actually very well surprised in a sense. I didn't know that the number of misdiagnosis or non-diagnosis of this issue was such a big number. I mean, I was actually had to look at it twice because it's it's like throwing almost a going to the casino rate. I blew me away. I mean, how is that? Obviously, that's been around and that's a factual thing. But yeah, can you give us a thoughts on that? Because that's a big number, right? 50%.
For sure. Yeah, and look, we would never pretend that our cardiologists around the world aren't the best there are, and they are. These guys are trained. The men and women in cardiology are trained, with some of the best training available. It's not that there's a lack of education or knowledge in cardiovascular care. It's just that what they do is really, really hard. And so when we look at some of the things, so we'll talk a little bit today about aortic stenosis, which is a valve disease, which impacts pretty significant number of people around the world. And we'll talk about heart failure, which is a structural heart problem. And so in many of these occasions such as aortic stenosis, up to 20% of patients will get mis or underdiagnosed every day. And it could be as high as 40%. And that's documented in literature around the world. But heart failure, we're seeing the documented literature today saying it's around 50% of patients get mis or underdiagnosed. And these are a host of reasons. I mean, these are complex diseases. Oftentimes patients present, with different types of symptoms that aren't always, indicative of the disease itself, and or they present late, or there's simply just the challenge of getting the accurate data to input for a cardiologist to make the right call. So yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers, you go, that just doesn't seem right. That people can be missed this often for a disease that has fatal consequences. Aortic stenosis today, if you're diagnosed with severe aortic stenosis, you have a 50% mortality rate at 2 years. That means that medical intervention needs to happen, or in a couple of years from now, you may not be there to have that conversation with the doctor. So it is frustrating that patients get mis or underdiagnosed every day. It's not a lack of education or training by cardiologists. These guys are world class. It's just a very complex disease. And what we're able to do is simplify that down to the doctors one extra piece of tool in their toolkit to help them get that diagnosis rate to nearly 100%. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. AI technology today, that word gets thrown around a lot, and we'll talk about it hopefully, and we'll dig into it a bit today. In some cases, it really doesn't serve the greater good. In this case, I think what our technology can do is to serve the greater good, help that cardiologist that can find those patients that they would have normally missed and get those patients into the right medical intervention that they need.
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned that AI word gets thrown around a lot, and the real understanding of it is a more complex than just two letters. Look, one of the
Mhm.
things that is I want to get us talking about is obviously you got a market cap now of around 139 million based on what's happening today as the market's just open. Um, Look, the chart looks impressive in the sense that it's a going that way as opposed to you know the other way, and it's a long journey. It's over what I'm looking at 3 years or so. And obviously you guys are doing hitting milestones. And can you just give us as much as you can? And I appreciate you've just joined the team, but what has created those positive moves over the time?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, and very versed on where we've come from and where we are, and look, we're by no means satisfied with where we're at, and we don't believe that the valuation that the company has today is an accurate valuation of what the technology will bring for the future. So my job is to make sure we can tell that story and help to drive that valuation to much bigger levels than we are today. But the journey has been quite successful up to this point. So if you take kind of a 3 year kind of step back and look at where the company was and where we are today, this was originally a technology that was actually found by two pretty incredible professors, one Professor David Playford and the other Professor Jeff Strange, who were actually looking for a solution really simply within the clinic themselves. They were really trying to understand, look, we're missing patients, and there's got to be a better way that the technology could be used to help create efficiency and identify and diagnose patients. And so Andrew Grover and the team actually stumbled upon this about 3 years ago, and it was really at that moment that the light bulb went off that a simple solution that they were looking at, putting the right resources in place and actually putting a development team behind it could actually magnify this to actually be a solution that could work commercially around the world. And that's really where the start of EchoIQ came from. So in the initial setup of the organization, there was an interesting partnership that was formed between EchoIQ and NEDA, which is the National Echo Database of Australia. This is one of the largest databases in the world, and we are privileged and fortunate enough that we work directly with the NEDA database to be able to train our models, and exclusively we have access to commercialize any of the training of our models coming out of that. So what that really means as part of the start of EchoIQ and the partnership with NEDA is that we were going to really be able to develop something quite interesting. So that was about 3 years ago. And you see the milestones that have achieved since then. So we had the first late breaker data presented around the heart failure model, and then ultimately aortic stenosis. That led to validation studies, which ultimately led to an FDA submission back in 2023. And it was in 2023 that we had the first conversation with the FDA and ultimately got approval from the FDA in late 2024, which was the first opportunity for the company to have a really major milestone. It went from a research and development company to an actual commercial company at that point. And that's really where we start the real journey of the company. And I think, not that I'm changing the calculus, but January of 2025 is a chance we actually put a stamp on EchoIQ and said we're no longer an interesting idea. We're actually a company with a cleared product that actually can sell directly into the medical space. And then from there, we've just started to build. My job now is to really start to tell the story about where we're going to go from the future. So yes, today we're 130, 140 million valuation. I think that is a massive undervaluation of what this technology will bring. We've got the first FDA cleared product in. We've made the first milestone, which is get integrations done. So we've made announcements such as things like Beth Israel. This is part of the Harvard Medical School. It's known around the world as being one of the preeminent, medical schools to focus on things such as technology and cardiovascular care. We're integrated with them. They were our first flagship. We're integrating in a number of hospitals now. We're working with the CPT and the American Medical Association to get a category code for reimbursement. And we've signed a number of partnership deals that we've announced. So those milestones are continuing to build. We believe that the next 4 to 6 months are going to be kind of those tipping points for us as we start to bring new data and new information to the market around our milestones. We're looking to have a second product in the market by the end of this year, early next, which is heart failure. We're looking to have reimbursement codes available, and we're looking to have another strategic partnership agreement in place very soon. So you'll start to see milestones continue to build from us. So are we happy with the progress? Absolutely. It's amazing where we came from and where we are. Are we satisfied with where we are today? Absolutely not. And we expect to see, that line, as you say, going in that direction up and to the right over the period of the next several months to bring not only the shareholders' values, but to bring a technology to market that helps millions of patients around the world.
So when I look at the business, obviously we are looking at from a potential investor kind of view, and obviously the curve going in the right direction. Would it be a fair thing to say that you guys have proven the concept and now you're trying to get revenue? Is that where you would be? Can we say that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I'd probably tweak it a bit and say that we're beyond proof of the concept. I think we are validated and cleared as a technology, which is the most important thing. And so a lot of people say, when you get into the space, wow, if you get FDA clearance or regulatory clearance, you've made it. All that does is just prove your technology works. So now our job is now to get that technology utilized in the right hands of the cardiologist, and then ultimately we get paid for that. And so that's where we're at now. So we're in our revenue generation phase now. We've always said that through the course of the summer here in the United States and into the fall is when we start to see revenue generating, and then we'll see meaningful revenue start to materialize over the next several quarters, and that's our goal now. So when people bump into me, I say, listen, we are an FDA cleared company with a product today. We are pre-revenue on our way to generating revenue and ultimately to cash flow positivity over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Um, I mean, obviously, you mentioned the fact that, the issue is not the cardiologist not being up to scratch to to breach that gap of 50% misdiagnosis or non-diagnosis. Can you just go down to that level? Like what is the core issue that's creating difficulty and hence allowing you guys to come in and put your product on top of it and try and reduce that number?
Sure. Yeah. So, and this is where we'll get, and I'm not going to be a sophisticated tech person here, but I think we can get into how the AI works. But really, when we think about today in a cardiologist world, if you were, suspected of having, an aortic stenosis, or I was suspected, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. The first course of action is to get an echocardiogram. So it's a 2D ultrasound image of the heart. That's done everywhere, regardless of where you sit in the world. And so those are fraught with a whole number of challenges. One, it's usually going to be run by a human, and that's you've seen the pictures of them. They put the echo cardiogram ultrasound image across your heart, and they do it across your chest, and they'll take the images, and they take upwards of up to 100 images of your heart at any different angles. And what can happen there is, unfortunately, sometimes those images can get missed. Sometimes they're blurry. Maybe they don't have the best resolution. And what will happen in many cases is the cardiologist gets those images and they just don't have enough information. They just don't have enough. And so they'll either make a determination for that patient to come back, or they'll say, we'll see you in a year from now. It looks like most of the parameters are fine. Well, that's fine and okay for somebody who maybe doesn't have a disease or potentially has a mild to moderate case of a disease. But what we've come in is we've introduced into our algorithm and our technology is that behind each one of those images actually sits a number of measurements behind those. And it's ones and zeros, just like you'd see in any computer program. Well, what we've developed with our multidimensional neural network is that we actually harness all of those the images, the data that sits behind those images, and we actually create. And this is where it gets a little bit science fiction and technical. Is we actually create a 3D version of that patient's heart. We take all of those measurements and those metrics, and we actually create a 3D version of the heart inside of our neural network. What that allows our technology to do is then give back to the cardiologist an image of what's happening to that patient. And we'll tell it to them in basically a PDF form or simply table form to say the technology sees the presence of a disease today that may have been missed with the images, or it predicts or gives a phenotypic risk score of what that patient may have today or in the future. And that's where we actually can bring value to that physician who might have missed it because the image wasn't good, the quality wasn't there, or they just couldn't see based off of the echocardiogram. We provide the data behind that image to say, here's what's actually happening. And what it is, it's one more piece of information the cardiologist has to start making that diagnosis. And typically what we find are those 20% of patients that are missed, or those 50% of patients that are missed, we provide the color for that cardiologist and we give them the aided diagnostic tool to make the ultimate decision for the patient.
And obviously, there's error on the human side of things to figure things out. But what is the accepted error? What you guys think is the error that potentially could come from the AI side of things on the predictions part of it? Like you said, like we think could be a disease, etc. What is the accepted value? I mean, there's always going to be an error somewhere. What is the accepted margin?
Yeah, and this is where we were very thoughtful about our approach because we understood that this was developed by cardiologists to be used by cardiologists. So obviously the number one thing is you can't misdiagnose somebody either by telling them they have a disease, or actually more problematic, telling them they don't have a disease when they do.
Mm.
So when we looked at both our positive and negative predictive values, we had set our thresholds very specific to create a sensitivity analysis that was allowing us to make sure that when we said somebody does not have a disease or presence of a disease, we were within the 99.5% threshold of saying we were confident that that patient does not have the disease, because that's the last thing you want, is for us to be able to provide that information to cardiologists and actually miss a patient. We did not want that to happen. So we moved our thresholds down enough to be sensitive enough to make sure that that negative predictive value was that when we said you do not have a disease, we're 99.5% positive you do not have that disease, which gives us that comfort that we're not sending, your loved one or my loved one home with a misdiagnosis. On the same side, we had to make sure on the positive predictive value side that when we did say somebody had presence of a disease, we would make sure that within 99% accuracy on that, that we were making sure that patient does have the disease. They may not have aortic stenosis when we give it to the cardiologist. And about 0.5% of the time, it may not be aortic stenosis. But what our model is telling them is that we see structurally something happening with this patient's heart that requires you to work them up and look differently. And it may be something like, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or maybe something else. But we know that when the model says there's a sensitivity analysis here that represents presence of disease, we know that they have a disease of the heart at that moment in time. So we set our thresholds to the point where we are sensitive and specific enough to make sure that we were right on both the positive side and the negative side for those patients. And I was very comfortable with that when we went to the FDA to say we do not want to screen a patient out or screen a patient in that does not or does have the disease. We're very conscious of that. And ultimately, we don't make the diagnosis anyway. It sits with the cardiologist, and that's been a very important part of what I wanted to do with AI. We're not looking to replace cardiologists. I don't want that to happen. I don't think that our training is enough to replace a cardiologist. I want to make them better. And so I give them the tool that makes them better, and I give them that last little bit of information they need to be able to diagnose accurately.
And I think this is the point I think you were making. I was agreeing that the real effectiveness of AI is that to help the human, not replace the human, because I don't think we're at that stage. So the next question I'm thinking is, the 50% is a big number, etc. What is the realistic number that you guys think you could get to, or we should get to? Obviously, 0% is the number we should get to, but realistically, what is the number that we could get to, and what is the realistic number you guys think you could get to?
Yes. Well, when we look at and I'll always come back to our clinical evidence to support our claims. But if you look at our clinical validation studies, and these are all been published online, and we're happy to share that with the viewers. In fact, I've got a couple, one of the slides that we'll be happy to put up here that they'll see while I'm talking, that actually shows some of the clinical studies we've done with our technology. So for aortic stenosis, for example, over 4 studies, and these are studies that have included upwards of 200,000 patient lives in those studies, we've been able to demonstrate 100% accuracy in diagnosing severe aortic stenosis. And so that would be fine if that was one study, but when we can do that multiple times over multiple different studies in multiple locations around the world, that tells me that our technology is very sensitive and specific to identifying severe aortic stenosis. So when we put a patient in that category of severe aortic stenosis, our model has been up to 100% accurate on those patients. So I think we closed the gap, and that's important. What's really interesting is what's happening with aortic stenosis today, where they're seeing guidelines starting to change. And we've been working directly with a number of thought leaders in the guidelines committees around what does it mean when somebody doesn't have severe aortic stenosis, but they have mild to moderate. So this is somebody who now we can start identifying to say, if we get intervention earlier, do they have better outcomes? And obviously it makes sense. If you find somebody who's got diabetes earlier, obviously you can probably treat that patient and do better. So in this case, if we find patients with earlier, such as mild to moderate, can that actually have better patient outcomes? And we're working on that data now. Our technology is one of the few in the market today that actually can diagnose those patients with mild to moderate. So now you start talking about risk scores and what does it mean to say somebody doesn't have stenosis today, but they have mild stenosis. So what does that mean for them in the future? How do we give that diagnosis to the physician to have medical intervention? So right now, 100% accurate on the severe aortic stenosis, which is great. We're really looking to what means when we start talking about mild to moderate. And that's going to be an interesting next couple of years to see how the guidelines and patient intervention changes.
Okay. I mean, in terms of obviously from the market point of view, and I'm trying to be practical in the sense is someone's going to be sitting here watching this. Of course, you're going to say that because you're the CEO. And how do you reply to that question or statement?
Around the benefit of the technology?
Yeah, well, of course you're going to say you're the best, or you can, and things like that, right? I mean, that's an obvious thing, and the skeptic out there is going to say, well, okay, what makes you think you're so good?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair critique of any AI technologies, and that should be the same that we
Yeah,
should be measuring
anything that
ourselves
someone
against.
has a
Of
solution for.
course, of course. Yeah, and I think where I talk a little bit about rather than being different or better, it's the actual approach that we've taken. So there are a number of companies out there, and I'm happy to talk about all of them. I know all the CEOs that are currently working on interesting technologies in our space. I think what separates us and why I think ours is better in terms of utility within the workflow. And there's really two reasons for that. One, I actually happen in real time. So because the way that I actually take the measurements off of the echocardiogram, I'm taking measurements, ones and zeros, right? If you think about ones and zeros as a computer program, we're taking those measurements. That can happen in kind of lightning speed. So and typically I'm turning things around in 3 seconds. So when a cardiologist hits the button, I pop up instantaneously with our results. The reason that's different and why I think we are better in this space is simply because for many of the folks who use image recognition, and that was one of the other companies I was talking about, that is large data files. That is a tremendous amount of data that they have to analyze. And oftentimes that can take hours to get the results back. That's not conducive to real-time input. You know, when you think about wanting technology to create efficiency, you want it to happen almost instantaneously so that you're getting the information on real time. And I do that. And I think the second thing that makes me unique and different is that because I'm using those measurements in the background, my model is trained to be able to identify missing information and be able to do what's called imputation. And so when we build this kind of 3D version of the heart, as I said before, on inside of our neural network, my model doesn't need every data point to make that analysis. It can take a very small subset of those data points and still give an accurate diagnosis back to the physician. So what does that mean? That means human error, which we know is possible. We can overcome that. We know that technological errors that happen, whether it's the lack of information or the lack of the data or lack of an image, I can still get my model to be able to give a reputable, reproducible, but accurate diagnosis back to the physician. So in real time, I can impute and give that doctor that diagnosis they need. Because again, who wants a tool that only works half of the time? You want a tool that works every time and wants to work in real time. And that's why I'm different and than what's in the market today. I think what the other companies are doing are fantastic. They just don't compete directly with what I'm doing. And that's why I think that we are unique and different and actually better suited for the cardiologist today.
So what you just explained, I guess, I've got a question here. Obviously, I use ChatGPT to play around with what can I get out
Another AI tool. Great.
Yeah. What can I get out that I can't think of? And it's talking about EcoSolve being a hospital workflow. I think is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
The actual process, the workflow of how you do this, then you do the other bits and things like that.
Yeah, so there's kind of an unwritten rule that, especially in the U.S. health system, but it sits in every health system around the world, is that any new technology should be an enhancement to workflow in the hospital, and it shouldn't be a distraction. And basically, what that means is hospitals have designed very, very, eloquent workflows, and those workflows are designed to make the hospital mostly efficient as possible. And at the end of the day, hospitals still have to make money. So hospitals have to create a workflow that's efficient, that helps them make money, and ultimately gets the patients out the door and with the best outcomes. So what we've really developed our technology on is how do we make sure we sit directly in that workflow and we don't disrupt the workflow, but we make it more effective. And that's going to be the key to everything going forward. AI, any technology that comes into the hospital better improve that workflow, or it's just not worth the effort and time. So we've developed our technology to sit directly on the software that within the hospital system itself. I don't need to create another monitor. I don't create another software system. I don't have the doctor log in, log out. We sit directly on the system that they're using today, and I do it in real time. So when they're doing their read-ups and they're looking at their echoes, I'm sitting right there, right beside them. So when they hit the button, I'm right there. They don't have to wait. They don't have to log into something else. We are right there. That is the critical nature of workflows in hospitals. And those that want to bring new technologies out, so I'm talking to any other CEO out there who has a new technology, you better check to make sure you fit in the workflow and you make it better and you don't slow it down. And what we've done is made it better. We've made it faster. In fact, we just presented data at a recent cardiovascular conference. Hopefully the data will be published shortly, but it's online as part of a late breaker presentation. We were able to demonstrate in a real world setting that we increased the overall workflow efficiency by 25% in a hospital system, simply by having our technology there. And it was simply because, and I love the quote, one of the physicians said it, and I use it now and I steal it shamelessly, is I give them the answer to the test before they take the test. So as soon as they get ready to go look at the patient files, I pop up, here's the answer, here's what the AI has seen. Cardiologist looks at the report and goes, yep, okay, good, and move on to the next. So we give them that answer before they take the test, and it creates that efficiency of workflow. So we presented that data a couple of months ago, and we're starting to see really good success with hospitals, seeing the opportunity to integrate in and have this efficiency gain by having better outcomes for patients.
In terms of income, in terms of the Echo's potential income, are you able to share with us what is the path that you guys see as, how you're going to knock off the milestones for increasing your revenue, the steps that you do, the strategies and things like that?
Sure, and we'll have a slide up for the viewers here to look at. But obviously, the one of the most important things in the United States is reimbursement. Obviously, as you work with hospital systems, they either have to pay for a service or they get reimbursed for a service, and that's really where hospitals make their real big decisions on this. And as a software solution, obviously, I could just charge them to use my service. I believe I'm worth the cost to be paid. But at the end of the day, the best thing for me is to work directly with the healthcare systems to get reimbursement so that the hospitals can then get paid back for their services that they render. And so we've got a really nice slide that you'll be able to show and walk through on this, which actually shows what we're working on reimbursement. So right now, we have what's called a miscellaneous code in the United States that we've been able to identify with. It's called code 93799. This code allows a hospital to get reimbursed for a small percentage of their patients. Miscellaneous codes are used for new technologies that haven't quite been able to establish a code, and the hospitals can get reimbursed on those codes, but it probably happens 10 or 15% of the time. So not every patient's going to get reimbursed, but the hospital can get reimbursed. And that reimbursed right now at around $148. So it's a reasonable reimbursement rate for a technology like ours, and we're very happy with that. So we're starting to use that code with a number of our hospitals and starting to set up our subscription model. Our ultimate goal, though, is to move into a Category 3 code. So this is a new technology code. For a product like ours, you submit an application to CPT, which is run by the American Medical Association, and they review your panel application, and then we have a meeting with them, and they discuss whether they want to give us a code. We met with them in May. We had some interesting feedback, and we've been moved now to a September meeting. So for those that have been looking at our share and our share price and saying, look, you had a big run up to about 30 cents, and it kind of popped down to around 20. That's simply because we got delayed on our CPT code. We're going to be back in to have a CPT meeting in September. Actually, September 18th is our meeting. This will give us a chance to argue for our access to a Category 3 code. This code allows a big percentage of patients to get access and get reimbursed at the hospital level, which is exactly where we want to be. They can use our technology, they can get reimbursed at the hospital, and ultimately the patient doesn't have to pay out of pocket for the service, which is the key that we have. And then ultimately, we're going to work to a Category 1 code over time, and that sometimes takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months, and we're working on that process now. So that we have a slide that shows kind of that progress, and so we're right in the middle of the progress now, hoping to have our CPT Category 3 code by the end of this year. And if that meeting goes well in September, hopefully they'll have it to us sooner. And if that's the case, we'll have a very robust reimbursement pathway for our patients to have access to the technology and for the hospitals that use it. And that's how we'll start to generate a revenue. We do a subscription-based model. That's a revenue share with the hospital based on reimbursement. And those hospitals get the opportunity to use the technology and then get reimbursed back through the Medicare and Medicaid system. So very complex in the United States. It's quite different than many other, kind of single payer systems like we see in Australia and other places. But it is a system I know very well, and we're bringing the right team in to help us navigate that.
Okay. And I mean, when we look at the market that you're in, I think one of your slides I took this from your presentation. It points to a 17 billion dollars in heart failure and 10 billion in the aortic valve disease. How do you position yourself? Are you guys kingpin, or are you trying to be kingpin, or there is a bigger brother on the playground? Where do you position yourself, or where do you see and where do you see yourself potentially going?
Yeah, I think in realistic terms, we will be a market leader in the aortic stenosis market. Our solution just has demonstrated over multiple different clinical validations that if we can diagnose patients at 100% accuracy for severe aortic stenosis, it just makes sense that we will dominate in that market. Heart failure market's interesting. So we have our second solution in with the FDA now. We made the announcement a few weeks ago that the Mayo Clinic, which is also another world-renowned institution in the United States, is doing our validation work prior to our submission to the FDA for our heart failure solution. So our goal is to submit the heart failure solution before the end of this year and have approval by the end of this year, early next. That market is really large. There's a number of competitors trying to enter that market. I think we will have a distinct competitive advantage because of the way our technology works versus the others using image recognition. But there is a company out there called Ultramics who is in the market today. I really love that the technology. It's interesting. It's unique. They use image recognition. So we talked about that earlier about there's some just, inherent flaws with image recognition that make those challenges, more difficult in the hospital setting. But look, they just raised $55 million on a Series C, capital raise about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So if you look at a technology like them in heart failure, with a technology like ours coming, I think it really shows that the value of our technology is probably undervalued in our share today. Raising 55 million, they're a private company, so we don't really know exactly what their market cap would look like. But I'd have to believe that market cap puts them somewhere between 3 and 500 million. And these are all US dollars, right? So it's a very significant market cap for a company like that. And they're raising 55 million on the promise of commercializing with a category code in the US system. I think when you see our technology come post FDA clearance, we're going to be able to utilize the code that's currently in the system. I think our technology is slightly better than theirs. So if we just use that as a litmus test, it gives us a really good understanding of the valuation of what the company has in front of us. So I think in aortic stenosis, as you said, it's a very large market. I think we become market leader quite quickly in that space. And then I think heart failure, it becomes about competitive differentiation. And I think we'll be able to do very well to take a tremendous amount of market share. And that is a $70 billion and $70 billion US dollar, total addressable market there. So it definitely has opportunity for us.
Is it correct I'm hearing the fact that I think the reimbursement is the key milestone catalyst? Is that correct? Like, it seems that if you get that, not to say license to print money, but that's the key point that you guys are chasing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think I think it's fair to say that it is a catalyst for acceleration, for sure. Many companies, sell software as a solution to hospitals all day long, and we'll do the same under a subscription model. But when you get reimbursement, it is two things. One, it is an opportunity for hospitals to participate very quickly and for them to be able to generate revenue. But more importantly, it's a validation of the technology, because a category reimbursement coding really says that the industry, not only the FDA, but the AMA, sees that there's value in this technology being utilized and being paid for. So those are milestones that are critical for businesses like ours. It's not the only critical milestone, but it is a critical milestone to an accelerated revenue generation model for sure.
So I'm picturing this, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're an IT company, you're an AI company, you're not a medical company. And if that is the case, then could you adopt your current technology to look at other diseases in the medical field?
Absolutely, absolutely, and again, as I mentioned before, having the ability to partner with Netta, and I love our partnership. So Netta does some amazing research out there, and they do research, for a whole nother, group of diseases, but they also do research that's just publicly funded research and whatnot. So when we work with Netta, the way our agreement works is that we train our model, and anything that can come out of that training that creates a commercial product, we have exclusive access to. And so we're looking at a number of different diseases right now. We're looking at things such as pulmonary arterial hypertension. We're looking at mitral valve regurgitation. We're looking at hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So these are different diseases within the cardiovascular space that are really untapped diseases today that really have no good solutions in the market. So, could I look at my model and train it on other diseases outside of cardiology? Possibly. But there are so many areas within cardiology today that do not have good solutions that, I can take my model and apply it to each and every one of those. So right now we're working on a number of different strategic partnerships right now, looking at potential research and development opportunities for those diseases. And hopefully we'll be making some announcements shortly around the way the pipeline looks. But again, that partnership with Netta allows us to be able to look at training the model because that's a huge database. And then obviously there's a number of partners out there who are looking for solutions such as ours to be able to build and develop a research pipeline.
Yeah, look, AI is kind of thing. I mean, we touched on this very in the very first few questions we talked about, the understanding of AI. I mean, I see you guys here as really an AI tech company, and artificial intelligence. Most people came about when we started seeing ChatGPT and Siri and and things like that. But But if you look at the underlyings of AI, I mean, it's just coding, right? It's coding's been around for ages, and we were automating Excel spreadsheets and things like that. How far, in your opinion, obviously you're in the industry using it at a much higher level. How far do you think we've come, and how far do you think this could go? I mean, do you see, obviously, I don't think we're at the peak or anything. I think there's an acceleration of users and the practice of AI. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, I think AI is still in its infancy. I mean, obviously we haven't even gotten to the full ability of quantum computing, and obviously that requires even more, ability for the computers to be able to do, calculations and equations beyond, even kind of what the human kind of mind can process at the moment. So I don't think we're there yet, and that all that will lead to AI models and AI algorithms that are just going to get stronger and stronger. So I think what we've done to try to make sure that we stay, one, relevant and important, and two, to make sure that we can, as a company, continue to thrive and survive in this space is obviously intellectual property matters, right? So we've been able to put IP protection around the model, and mostly not necessarily the way we do the model, but the thresholds that we have and the algorithm behind it. And I think you'll see companies that'll struggle with being able to protect their models in the future. And we've done our best to make sure that we protect our models so that we can continue to maintain a business. But as computer programming continues to get stronger and stronger, and quantum computing gets to be better, I think we're going to see probably. And I remember exactly the way they call the curve, but that curve is exponential, right? I think we're just seeing the beginning of what that curve looks like. And I hope that most of this technology is advancements that's more positive for the overall greater good than it is for negative. And obviously some of the things that we see with AI today still have human biases in there. And I think that's a challenge that we have. One of the things that we're actually looking at, and not the question you asked me, but one that I feel is important, is how do we protect the AI space to make sure that we strip biases out of that? Because obviously you can instill biases into an AI technology if you
Mm,
want, and you can strip them out. And so one of the things we've actually been looking at most recently, and I'm really excited about where we have the future to go here, is that when we start actually looking at patients and we start looking at who are those that are most often mis or underdiagnosed, if you take one layer below it, you start to identify the fact that there is a bias that's happening. It's unconscious, and nobody's saying that people are purposely not being diagnosed correctly, but women make up the vast majority of the mis and underdiagnosed of that population, disproportionately, because really men and women basically have about the same rate of cardiovascular disease. But if you look at who is mis and underdiagnosed, it's women at a very disproportionate rate. So we went back to look at our data set to say, are we seeing something happening here with our technology that can strip that bias out? In fact, what we just saw, and we're going to be presenting this data over the next several cardiovascular conferences, one in Europe and the other in the United States, that our technology actually has the ability to strip the bias out and actually diagnose women at the same rate as men. So what we've done is actually taken that gender bias out of the equation. We actually don't ask for gender when we actually look at the modeling of our AI algorithm. And so I think this is where I'm hoping the AI future goes to, where we can actually strip any of these type of underlying biases that happen. And again, like I said, it's not a cardiologist purposely not diagnosing a woman. They would never do that. But women are just different. Their anatomy is different. They often present with different symptoms, and oftentimes they get missed. And when we actually look back underlying of ours, our technology actually strips that out, and we diagnose them at the same rate. So I'm really excited about the future of looking at cardiovascular care in women. How do we start partnering with places like the American Heart Association to say, how do we make sure women are getting diagnosed at the same rate? Because I can tell you, if it's my mom or my aunt or my grandmother, I sure as heck want them to get the right diagnosis. There's no reason
mm.
they should get a different diagnosis than if my grandfather went in to get the diagnosis. So we're really excited about what the future holds there. You're going to see a lot of information coming out about this from us. I would like to be the thought leader here. I think we should, as a company, stand up and say women should have the best opportunity to get outcomes as men do. And if our technology helps strip that bias out, then that's a wonderful solution for AI. So, let's see. But obviously, we've seen biases be instilled in ChatGPT, and we saw it in Gronk and others as people are doing, their memes that they put out there around that. And we hopefully that that's something that gets corrected over time.
I think the bias is a very important topic because you're talking about gender there, but then if you start thinking about genetics, everyone's different. the way we absorb
Hmm.
certain things, the way we react to certain things. You see a 100-year-old chain smoker and you see a 30-year non-smoker. Um, that kind of bias. And I think that's where AI is really good. It can increase the not say it's a cure, but increase the time for you to make your decisions based on data sets and there's more and more data sets being available as we speak, right? Every day there's a bit more
Yep.
data. I think that's a very
Yep.
important part. The fact that you use AI to increase your ability to assess all this information. And
Yep.
I can imagine the medical field's one, where you ask the records whether the guy's telling you the truth or not.
Hmm.
Again,
For
that
sure.
affects your diagnosis as well.
Absolutely. And right now, and we're seeing that, I think even just recently, I don't know which one of the big tech CEOs came out and talk about that, but the AI and the ability for AI to get better and better is only as good as the data it can be received in. And
Mm,
so really right now, data becomes almost more valuable than many other things in the market today. And that's why I talk a lot about our relationship with Meta. It's just having access to reliable data that allows these models and AI to get better and better and better. And so right now, I think a lot of people struggle with getting access to really good quality data. And if you don't have the good inputs in, it's hard to get a good output out. So for us, it's really important that we have good quality validation data that we train our models on, and that will just get better and better over time as the data gets stronger and stronger to put in. So hopefully these biases will get eliminated across multiple different therapeutic areas and medicine. But again, your point's valid. It's every human being is different, and you want to have technology that helps to help everybody get the best outcomes they can.
Look, from an investor's point of view, and the ASX is at an all-time high. I mean, I don't know what's happened this morning. Hope it didn't go the other way. The US market's buoyant, as you know. So can you provide us some thoughts for those wanting to participate in the journey? Obviously, 140 million market cap. Everyone gets the jitters because everyone wants to get in at 2 million, but they don't want the risk. They just want the rewards, as usual. Um, how do you measure the anxiety if they jump in now and the market corrects, right? What should they see in the business that is robust enough for it to write that out? Because the old Warren Buffett thinking, right? Buy a business and don't worry about it. Um, so can you just maybe outline to us the robustness of what EchoIQ means? Because for those guys sitting there, go, oh, this is a great story. Thanks for coffee with Samso. I'm going to buy this stock. But then the market tanks itself, and they're going to say, "Well, what do I do?"
Sure, sure. Well, listen, I mean, I think every investor, at times can follow the hype, but I think the same thing always holds true, which is back to the fundamentals, right? So, if you look at where we're at, we just did a capital raise a couple of months ago. We've got a little over $18 million in the bank. I've got no debt. I'm burning about 500,000 a month. So if you look at sustainability, I've got a runway that gives me a good couple of years where I'm not coming back with my hand out. So if you just look at fundamentals, we're strong. And then if you look at valuation, again, a few clicks of research can look around and say, as an Australian valuation right now, I think we're undervalued, and I think that's when you want to participate in a company where they've got good fundamentals. The valuation probably isn't true to what the market has to offer, and again, for us right now, we've got some really good strength coming, and we've got tailwinds to helping us. So we've got milestones coming around reimbursement. We've got milestones coming around a second product in the market. We've got addressable markets that are incredibly large and growing. And we're only in one market today, which is in United States. And obviously, as I expand across to, the Australian market, the European markets, the Canadian markets, the Middle Eastern markets, we've got ample opportunities to grow the technology. But come back to fundamentals. If you look at my balance sheet, we've got cash in the bank. I've got the commercialization efforts in front of us, and we got milestones coming. So I think really for most investors, it's going to come back to, is this the right valuation today? I think it's undervalued. We had a small correction when we did the capital raise, and we're back at 20 cents. I think we're a bargain today, and I don't see anything stopping us from growing, exponentially over the next several quarters and into the next several years. So, investors are nervous. Look at the fundamentals first. We got money in the bank, and we got a good burn rate, and I think then you look at what's coming for the business to know that we've got upside and potential growth. And as we expand in the U.S. market, it's just going to create more valuation for our shareholders.
And I'll make you stick your neck out a little bit even further. So 140 million market cap as we speak, and obviously, pipelines are all the upside. What kind of scales could shareholders be in? I know you guys are very standoffish, wanting to put a figure out there, but investors are not. Investors are always wanting, more than what they can have. So potentially, what space? I mean, we talked about the size of your market that you're in. If you became market leader, what kind of space could they be in?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I appreciate you trying to get me, too much out with where we're at. But I think, I oftentimes say, listen, let's just see what's out there and as kind of, proxies for where we're at. And I think one of the darlings of Australia has been Pro Medicus. I mean, they've been a company that, was in our same space, a number of years ago, and now they're, a few $100s a share. And they're directly in our space. And in fact, I've talked with Sam, the CEO, Sam Hupert, and his team on kind of what was that runway look like. And these are guys that grew 1,000% simply by getting that technology into the United States market and then growing it. And I think my one caution is it takes a bit of time. I am an impatient man, but I understand that things go slow, and I tell my team every day I don't like slow, but I understand it. And so I think that's the area to start looking at what other companies have done, what we want to do in this space, to know that this isn't a hope and a prayer. This is a solid fundamental company that has products in the market today that can grow. And a Pro Medicus is usually the one I look to and go, guys, look at what they did. Sam and that team grew that business over several years to get it to where they are, and it's a multi-billion-dollar valuation now. So are we going to be there someday? I certainly am going to make every effort to get there for sure. But I think that's realistic. And then if you just look at the U.S. market, what's happening today, the amount of capital being raised in this space right now in the U.S., checkbooks are open, and we're seeing lots of really nice capital raises happening. Whether it's 55 million with Ultramics, or we saw Heartflow just came out with an IPO. They went gangbusters over the last several weeks post IPO. The money's flowing in the U.S. right now for companies like this that's bringing innovative technology to the healthcare space. So can I tell you we're going to be 400 million in 12 months from now? I would love to tell you that, but I can't guarantee that's going to happen. But I can tell you other companies are seeing really good growth, and I think we're poised to be right in that same place.
Okay. Um, Look,
Probably not the answer you wanted, but it was close.
look, it's the answer that I know I was going to get. But I mean, investors probably already have a figure in their head anyway. So, um, look,
I've got one in my head for sure.
yeah. Look, we'll try and close it out. Look, what's your last words? I'll give you your last words. Sell your soul. I guess that's what the big chair is for you to champion the story. So before we close out, what's your last words to the guys out there?
Yeah, look, I think when you do a healthy bit of research, and I recommend everybody do so, and you can see what we've done. We're really poised for I think the next tipping point of the organization. I think we're going to start to see us really deliver some interesting news. The technology, we're in the right space. Cardiovascular disease, as I said, it's still the leading cause of death around the world, and that unfortunately is not diminishing; it's actually increasing. So we're in the right space. We've got, I think, the market leading technology here. And I think we've got the fundamentals to prove that we've got the team around us that are going to get us there. We've got the capital to do it. We've got the technology available, and we've got some really interesting news coming that's going to give people that confidence that this is a stock that's going to continue to grow over time. So I'd say do a bit of research here to understand what's happening in cardiovascular and AI technology. You'll see we're right at the front of that. We're going to be a market leader, and we've got a lot of tailwinds that are going to give us all the momentum to get us to get good growth. So if you're looking to be in a stock that's going to have several quarters of growth, I think this is one that's definitely worth keeping an eye on. And I'd say get in early as we start to generate more news and start to create more value for the organization.
Okay, look, it's fantastic chat. I don't know what time it is for you there, but we're just starting the day here in Perth. Thank you for your time, and I hope to keep following you guys. I'll definitely be watching all your news release. So Dustin, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and hope we can do this another time.
Anytime. I enjoy these long form formats. I think they're so critical to getting out the word of the business and what's happening in the industry. So anytime. So thank you for the invite.
All right, thank you.